thank you so much for being here today as we review the city's 2021 financials. We get together and review this annual report every year, and 2021 obviously was an interesting year, a challenging year, as 2020 was, as we're continuing to recover from the pandemic and the effect that it's had on city and on numbers. And this is the day we talk about numbers. And I think before we get started about the year, there's a number in this report that I think is interesting and something I talk about sometimes, but maybe not as explicitly as I'm going to today. There's a number on the very first page of the report. And it's been there since I've been here, and it was there long before I've been here. And that number is 55.37. 55.37. It's the square miles of the city of Pittsburgh. It's been the square miles of the city of Pittsburgh for almost 100 years. And so when we talk about our city and how we've lost population and how people have migrated out to the suburbs, that is largely because of that number, 5.37. When you look at cities around the country who have grown, those numbers have changed for them. So whether you're talking about Atlanta or Houston or even Louisville, they've grown their borders. We haven't. Interestingly, when you look at population density, our urban core is actually healthier than most of those other cities. So we're actually doing a lot better, arguably, than some cities. But I talk about that in terms of the conversations we're beginning now with places like Wilkinsburg, because that's going to be the next phase of public discussion, not just here in Pittsburgh, but with our suburban neighbors as well. Just in the news recently, Forward Township and Elizabeth Township are merging their police department, or actually one's taking over the other. And so, these conversations have to happen, whether it's mutual aid, whether it's cooperative agreements, whether it's outright merger or annexation. These are conversations that we have to remain competitive as a region. And so I think it's always interesting to talk about the fact that we still remain the 55.37 miles that we've always been. As for these numbers, let's talk a little bit. Let's start with our revenues last year, and this is tells you where our money comes from, right? So we know that real estate is our biggest tax. We know that earned income is our second biggest tax. This is basically a look at where the taxes come from. This is our a look at revenues exclusive of the ARPA funds last year and exclusive of the fees for services from last year. So basically our taxes. And you can see that like every other year, we rely primarily on real estate and unearned income, which basically means that the people who live here pay for most of the freight of what we do. Payroll prep tax was our business tax, is a much smaller portion of what we do. And if you look at this, you can see parking tax and amusement tax, small pieces of the pie and smaller than they used to be, right? Because we know that special events were dramatically impacted during the pandemic. We know that commuters aren't coming into town as much for the parking tax. That being said, parking last year actually increased from 2020 by $5.4 million. Still only $36.7 million, which used to be a $60 million line item for us, still down significantly from pre-pandemic days, and similar result in amusement tax. But the good news is that we brought in $24.5 million more than we spent. Now that includes the $33 million that we transferred in from ARPA. So you'll see in a minute that we did result in a surplus this year. But again, mostly driven by the fact that we had the ARPA funds. So we brought in a total of $606 million last year. That does include the ARPA funds. So that was a good year. Obviously, the ARPA funds help us get to a surplus situation. Without the ARPA funds, we would have had a $9 million deficit last year. And again, this is where we spend our money. This doesn't change much, right? We know that the goal of our city is to keep people safe and to keep neighborhoods clean. And you can see that's where we invest most of our funds. Public safety, streets and highways, and and our general government operations take up most of our expenditures. I would just note a little bit that you're starting to see a piece of that pie grow a little bigger this year, and that's debt service, as we have begun to get on a more responsible capital spending program, and we're now borrowing a little more. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but you can see that piece of the pie maybe has grown a little bit. So this is what was the result, right? So we know that, as I said, we brought in $24 million more than we spent. That resulted in a fund balance, basically our rainy day fund, of $106.8 million. Very healthy surplus, very healthy position to be in for the city. Again, wouldn't have happened without the ARPA funds. Without the ARPA funds, that number would have fallen to about $75 million. So we're in a much stronger position. We're not quite we're just below 20% of the budget with that number, which is, a healthy position when you talk to the folks at the GFOA or other ratings. That's a very healthy position to be in. Let me just talk a little about what that does. That enables a lot of things, right? That enables us. First off, it's what enabled us to get through the pandemic the first year, and we were at $133 million. That first year, obviously without that healthy fund balance, we would have had a tough time getting through the first year of the pandemic. But secondly, those funds help us to do additional things. So, in the past, what we've seen is we've done pay-as-you-go financing for capital projects. We've been able to transfer money into either the capital or the operating budget to do facilities work around the city's facilities, to buy equipment, to fix our staircases, and even to pave some additional miles of roads. So that fund balance is really what allows us to do that additional work that we need to catch up on this significant infrastructure deficit that we have. Just to talk in specific about one tax, and I'll talk about some others too without the graphic, but you can see this is, I think, one of the more impressive things that's going on in the city of Pittsburgh. This is our earned income tax. This is the wage tax. This is a tax that's paid only by people who live here in the city, and it's it's a percentage of their wages. Right now, it's 1.25%. That's generating $114 million for the city's budget. Not only up from last year, but even up from pre-pandemic. And so you wonder, what does that tell us about what's going on in the city of Pittsburgh? Because as you'll see as we get through this, it's not that we're adding a lot of jobs. It's that the people who are working are making more money, and likely, from what we hear anecdotally, working longer hours. So we are seeing higher pay, longer work hours. Median income in the city is up. It's kind of a twofold story, right? There are higher wage jobs in the city, and there are also a loss of lower income families in the city. We've seen lower income families moving out of the city, and that's a problem. That's one of the things I know that the Gady administration is focusing on and trying to bring about more affordable housing so that we can retain and attract back families of all economic status throughout our region. So this is an interesting number, particularly given the next number, which is the local services tax. Now, this is the $52 tax that is paid by everyone who works in the city of Pittsburgh. Whether you live here or not, you pay this tax, right? And you can see that it's basically back to, in 2018, we had a bump up year. We're still trying to figure that one out. But, we've always come in right around $14 million on this for the last number of years, going back 10 years now. We had the drop in 2020 from the pandemic. We've come back from that. Hopefully, we're going to grow from there, and we'll see significant job growth. But think about that. Not a lot of job growth, because this is, like I said, this is a tax on jobs, right? Against a much higher earned income tax. So it tells you that people are working. The other thing we know about the LSAT is we know there are a lot of indications that the regional workforce is down, right? We've not recovered at all from the pandemic with the number of jobs that were in the region prior to the pandemic. and a lot of explanations why that happens, whether it's people early retirements, people who have left the workforce altogether. Maybe some of it's population loss. Some of it is that students who used to take jobs aren't doing that as much as they used to. There are a lot of reasons why that's the case, and I don't know if there's any one answer to that problem. But in a region where we haven't recovered workforce, Pittsburgh's not doing so bad. If you look at the average over the last 10 years, again, despite that bump in 2018. That's also interesting to me because we were concerned about what work from home would mean, right? So if people who have jobs here in the city are now working from home and not paying this tax, what's the impact of that? And at least for right now, we're not seeing a major impact from that. But as time goes on, we'll know. I actually think there are probably people working from home who are still paying this tax because their employers are withholding it. But we'll see as time goes on. It's something we're going to have to watch. Let me just talk while we're on this page. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other taxes. As I mentioned, parking tax increased by $5.4 million over last year, but still significantly down from the $60 million we were at in 2019. Payroll prep taxes, which is our business tax, is also down, which is troublesome because payroll prep tax is a tax on payrolls. It's a tax on the people who are working for those companies. And that number is down, which I think suggests that while the regional workforce is down, the city workforce, people living in the city, hasn't impacted them as much, right? So, we're seeing that as you see here, the number of jobs in the city getting back, but yet payroll prep taxes, our businesses aren't paying as much as they were, right? So, and we know that some of our businesses pay a payroll prep tax for some people who don't necessarily work right in the city. So, there's something that's one of the things we're going to question and look at over the next year to figure out why that's happening. Big increase in the amusement tax over the prior year, but still not back to where we were. We collected $7.5 million last year, which is an increase of $5 million over 2020, but we're still down from $16 million in 2019. The big performer is deed transfer tax, which continues to just do phenomenally well. Deed transfer taxes, we collected $64 million in deed transfer taxes last year. We do know that there's a very vibrant real estate market going on around Pittsburgh, both residentially and commercially. But that is a $20 million increase from last year, which was an increase over pre-pandemic time. So during the pandemic, real estate has not slowed down at all. In fact, it's significantly increased. This is one of the things that we like to talk about every year, and it's pension. This is our pension fund. So as you know, our pension fund is we calculate the pension two different ways, right? We calculate the pension of the total asset, which would include future revenues from our parking assets. This is just to look at the actual portfolio, the invested portfolio that we have, right? This is the money that we actually have on hand. And you can see it was at $699 million, almost $700 million that we now hold in the pension trust fund. That's more money than we've ever had. It's more money than we had last year. This is driven, of course, by the fact that we've gotten more serious about the money that we put into the fund, including the revenue from the parking asset, including the city doing more, and including some state funding that I'll talk about in a minute. But you can see the main thing here, of course, is market performance. So we've just since 2009, which predates this screen, there's been a major run up in the market. And we've benefited from that because we've been investing. And so now we're up at $700 million. 2022, as you know, is going to be a challenging year for equity markets. And we'll see where we are at the end of the year. But to be in a position where we've got $700 million in our investment portfolio is really great news for Pittsburgh. I mean, this is probably the best success financially that we could point to the city over the last 10 years. This is our long-term debt, right? You know, when I started here, we always talked about how much debt we had, and we had that year a few years ago where we really dropped our long-term debt, our debt service payments. This is the total debt, right? This is not a look at our annual payment to debt. This is the total debt. And you can see there was an increase between 20 and 21s because we did go out for a new borrowing. We did a new borrowing of that year for about $55 million. But this puts us in that position. I talked about it earlier, how much we pay into debt service. While that number is growing, we're still significantly lower than we were, and we are on a program now where we're wisely and responsibly investing in our capital program, and the best way to do that is through capital financing, and long-term financing. So we're seeing now a much more responsible kind of handling of our long-term debt. This is just a quick look at the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan dollars that we spent in 2021, and the vast majority of it, all of it, basically went to the city's budget. In 2021, we put $33 million into the city budget. Most of that went to hold off a workforce layoff. So we were able to keep everyone on the payroll. We were able to fulfill our obligation to our employees with a 3% wage increase for non-union positions. We were able to do, and then also invest in some green fleet improvements. But that's where the first chunk that we spent in 2021, and that's really the only money that really came out of the fund in 2021, was what you see right here. We know that there are additional allocations that are going to go to the URA and to the PWSA, but they'll happen at the earliest this year. We still don't have an agreement yet with the URA. I just recently signed the cooperative agreement with the PWSA for the allocation that they're going to get. So that'll happen this year. Just to give you a look, we've been talking about the impact that special events are having on the city through COVID. This is a look at, I'm going to show you a couple of these. This is what happened at the David Lauren Convention Center in the last 3 years. 198 events in 19, down to 56 events in 2020. Almost, well, a little more than a quarter. And then 89 events last year. And what it's done to the attendance number. Attendance number was actually down last year compared to 2020. And you can see the number of events that were canceled through the pandemic, 93 events canceled. And then we do get, there are a number of events they do charge, the home show and the car show and those kind of things. And so we get an amusement tax from that, and you can see what that impact that had for us. Not a great situation for us. So that's the convention center. This is PPJ paints the arena. This is the Penguin Arena, and first line are hockey games. They normally have 46 hockey games. They dropped down, over the last year. Their season obviously is on a different year than ours. They're on the July to June fiscal year, but 2021 they were down to half of what they were pre-pandemic, and attendance was even got crushed, right? So you can see what that does to us. And then you have their non-hockey events, which went from 106 in that 2018, 2019 to 9 in 2021, right? So obviously a big hit. And again, special events for this city are a key part of of how we make ends meet. I know people get upset when we clean up a parking lot after a concert, but it's worth it. Trust me, Heinz Field, you can see now this is sort of more of a story of recovery, right? Their fiscal year is April to March, and so we've got a closer, this is probably that third column gives you a picture of where we are, and you can see they basically have recovered. Steeler games, Panther games, and 2 concerts. So we've actually brought in more amusement tax in that period of time than we did pre-pandemic. So recovering on that front. And we would expect that would happen now as we move forward with the convention center and with the PPG, and just for a look at PNC Park. Their numbers might have something to do with not so much the pandemic, right? But you can see, they're coming back as well. I think this year, 2022, I think we have 2 concerts at PNC Park. I think we have 2 big concerts this year. So there'll be some additional revenue coming from that. So they're not quite back yet, but if we could ever find a way to win some games, maybe they'll do better. So this is just a total look at that over all those SCA hosted events. We're bringing in $11 million in amusement tax back pre-pandemic. We're down to 6 now, recovering but slowly. So we just wanted to give you a look at that so you could see where we are, and that's the end of it. And so let me just a couple other things I just want to cover quickly. The ARPA funds. I did go over it on the slide, but city received a total of $335 million. We've received half of it so far. We're about to get the second half, we think, in May, if not in May, in June. In 2021, we only spent $33 million of it. We have done additional outlays this year, and we'll continue to do so. In addition, we received about $26 million in CDBG funds from the federal government. One of the things that's I'm not sure that's that big of a concern, and we'll see moving forward. We get state pension aid every year, and it's usually around $24-25 million. And we got it last year, but it was decreased. The state pension aid comes from a fund that is created by people writing casualty insurance policies, and it's a surcharge on that. And that number grows every year, or at least it always has. Part of the problem is that they keep allowing more and more funds into it, so there are more people availing themselves to it. But the drop of 1.3 million down to 24.2 million last year isn't. I'm not sending red flags yet, but it's something we want to keep an eye on. We want to see if is that a result of the fund not growing, or is that a fund of more people coming in, and what's the impact going to be for the city moving forward? Because we do rely on that 24 million, 25 million a year to help fund the pension, which, as I said, is doing quite well. The only so that's where we are. I think, as you can see, we're in a very solid position. That position is in large part due to the American Rescue Plan, and but we're in this period where we're coming out of the pandemic. We're doing well, and if we can keep on this track, by the time we have expended those funds, we should be back to a more normal place and be able to move forward, in a more stable financial way. Let me first off thank everyone for the help on this. Our accounting staff, despite the pandemic and despite all the other challenges, they do a great job in getting this report out. Our responsibility under the Home Rule Charter is to present a verified statement of expenditures and revenues to council every year by May 1st. We've gone every year that I've been here. We've been able to go above and beyond that and actually issue the audited annual financial report by May 1st. And we were able to do it again this year, and that's because of the help of our audit staff, Kim McGann-Hertzer, Vicki Clark, Frank Thurner, Sarah Simmers, Tamika Phillips, Rhonda Rawlings, Brian McGregor, Liz Dilley, and Marcus Jester, who do a great job with this, along with our consultant, April Moister, and our friends, the team at Mara Dussel, do a great job. And of course, we can't do it without the great cooperation we get from all the city departments in helping us meet our deadlines. So certainly thanks to them.